Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the co-owner and creator of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and in this video, I want to talk to you a little bit about how to be appropriately vulnerable in a relationship. So, we have different stages of a relationship, and there are specific amounts of vulnerability sort of required as we progress through each stage. And I want to cover that in this video. But I also want to tell you that the way we show up when we are being vulnerable can be better received or less well received. And we're going to talk about some of the differences here and how to have the type of vulnerability in the conversations you want to have that is most likely to be well received, understood, respected, and valued, as well as the way that vulnerability is likely to spark a two-way vulnerable conversation. So before I dive into that, quick reminder, coupon code in the description box below for 25% off our whole school and the all access membership pass that gives you access to our social events, the 4 live Zoom calls I do with everybody each week, and 40 plus pre-recorded courses. So check that out. And there's a money back guarantee if you're not like so excited about everything that's in there. Um, so here's what I want you to start by recognizing. We don't want to show up in the dating phase of a relationship and air everything out at once. We want to have a little bit of time to get to know somebody in like sort of a drip format. And sometimes if people in the very first date, second date, third date are sort of sharing like all of their inner fears and worries, that's a beautiful thing. But to be completely honest, it's best received by people if it's happening sort of slowly over time. Now, in the dating phase of a relationship, we set the tone for the entire rest of the relationship. So, if in the dating phase of a relationship, we have a habit of being vulnerable just consistently and pervasively, that's excellent. That's really important. And ideally, as we progress through the 6 stages, that vulnerability happens more and more in the honeymoon phase. Then, even more in the power struggle phase, which the power struggle phase's main rite of passage is to learn to like drop the mask, show yourself, learn to express your flaws and your fears if you haven't already been doing so. And by doing it early, and making it habitual and normalized, we make it way easier to move through the power struggle phase very quickly. And the other main factor is to be able to learn to accept your partner's flaws because they also become more vulnerable and they drop the mask. And then that is actually what helps you to progress into the latter stages of a relationship, the stability, commitment, and bliss phases. And if we try to stunt the growth by avoiding any of these phases at any point in the relationship life cycle, we are likely to run into some big problems. So that's what I want you to understand first and foremost. Now, here's the difference between, and by the way, vulnerability is what takes infatuation and turns it into love. We can only infatuate with the story we create of somebody. We fall in love with what somebody vulnerably shares with us about themselves when we start to truly know that person's internal world, not just their surface level external world. And that's what makes for a lasting relationship. So when people get stuck on vulnerability, they're unwilling to be vulnerable, they're afraid, they can't open up. One of the first things I notice is that, okay, this relationship's probably not likely to last unless that person or both people in the relationship learn to change that. Okay. Or it can only ever reach like a certain glass ceiling in terms of its form of connection, its depth of connection. So these are really important things to become aware of. Now, here's like a misconception I see about vulnerability. Some people will think sometimes that vulnerability means crying or, opening everything up and sharing in a very emotional and dramatic way. And while that can be vulnerable and there's nothing wrong with being emotional, it's beautiful to be emotional and it's raw and it's authentic. Being consistently that way doesn't mean you're consistently being vulnerable in its highest form, right? So while it's good to not repress emotion, for somebody who's like a little vulnerability adverse, it doesn't mean you have to become like that. In fact, vulnerability is best received when it's done in a way that is communicated without too much emotion, because then somebody can interpret that as being like emotionally dumped on and you making them responsible for your feelings, or you invading their boundaries, or kind of putting everything on them. Vulnerability is best received when we're able to go, hey, I'm feeling afraid right now. And this is what I need to feel better. I could use some reassurance, or I could use a hug. And when we're able to communicate in like a normalized tone of voice, we're most likely to be heard. we are most likely to have our needs met, and we're actually most likely to open up a two-way conversation of vulnerability, which is extremely progressive and important in relationships. Because if we sometimes are too emotional, which again, like there's nothing wrong with being emotional, but what it will do is if that's always the way you're communicating vulnerability, it's unlikely to open up a two-way street of vulnerability, because the person then on the receiving end of hearing some of what you're sharing will be so focused on the fact that you're upset. Human nature is going to be, okay, well, if we're in this partnership, I'm going to have to, be here and support you, and so I'm not in the equation in the same way. But when we can say, hey, you know what, when this situation happened yesterday, I interpret it as like me not being good enough, and I could use some validation today, or whatever it is that you're going through. When we can communicate in a fairly grounded way, but we are vulnerably sharing our internal reality, our internal thoughts, feelings, beliefs, or triggers that came up, what we need to feel relief. And when we can get really clear on those parts, that's when we're likely to orchestrate breakthroughs in a relationship. And so that should be something that you do on your end. And then we can actually open the conversation up a step further by saying, hey, like when I'm sharing all this, what are you feeling? Like what's coming up for you? Or yesterday when the event happened, or last week when we had that fight, or whatever it is. What came up for you? What were you afraid of? And what do you need to feel better? And when we can start introducing that type of conversation and make that a new normal in a relationship, that is extremely healthy for people to bond. It's extremely healthy for people to be understood, feel seen, feel heard, feel like they have the capacity to get their needs met. And all of these things become deeply bonding factors in a relationship. This is what brings people together, because love isn't, being infatuated with the way someone looks, or the characteristics we see in them when they're on their best behavior, or their accomplishments, or their materials. Real and moving towards unconditional love is about understanding that person's internal reality and vice versa. And so these are really important features to have in our relationships, and we can't get there without having appropriate vulnerability that's pervasive and consistent in a relationship, having it a two-way street, and practicing this until it becomes something that's normalized in the relationship dynamic. So hopefully this makes a lot of sense. Let me know any questions you have in the comments below. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching, and I appreciate all of you. So let me know any questions. Happy to be of service for you guys and anything you want to see and hear. And I will see you in the next video.